Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. From the Paris of the Midwest, this is your nominated for Best News and Politics podcast in the country, Daily Detroit. I am J.R. Stays, and across the table from me is...
Brightmoor's finest, Norris Howard.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. It is fall weather already, which makes me sad.
Oh, I'm happy.
Autumn is my least favorite season of the year.
I'm so happy right now. I am in my moment of joy.
Can't stand it. 60 and overcast, ugh.
I have some news for you, maybe that you can stand.
Okay.
I got something got sent to me by a listener.
Okay.
Has to do with the previous episode. This is in the Hometown Life.
Oh, is this another, like, a hate mail thing?
Oh, no, this listener loves you. You know why?
Why?
Because they told us that Raising Cane's is coming to Canton.
Shut up, for real?
Yes, proposed for Ford Road right there at Sheldon. In the old TGI, in the TGI Fridays, turn that into a Raising Cane's.
Yes, because that's the most pointless Fridays on earth. I'm really, they in trouble. Raising Cane's is in trouble because I'm about to be in there all the time, bro. I've been waiting for this. I'm so excited for this. I love Raising Cane's, man. They got that sauce. It's like a Chipotle dipping sauce. Oh, my God, man. I'm so excited for this. Listen, if y'all ain't never been to Raising Cane's, go to Raising Cane's when it opens in Canton. I don't care. This is not sponsored. It is what it is. Raising Cane's, send me the affiliate codes right now. Right now. I will be your official Southeast Michigan spokesperson. I do not care. I love that place. I'm so hype. I'm hype. I'm so happy.
They also tell me there is one in East Lansing in case you want to make the drive.
No, I don't want to make the drive.
Okay,
Canton is great.
So there are some approvals that are needed. It looks like they're going to have to reset up some of that plot of land because they're expecting 40-car long lines.
I don't know about that, but
that's what they're expecting. They're expecting because it's the only one in the metro region. There's no others. There's no others anticipated. Whereas, say with Chicken Guy in Livonia, there's more that's going to be coming. That kind of thing.
No, that makes sense because I remember when Popeyes. So my wife, she's from Kalamazoo, and Kalamazoo never had a Popeyes. And the first Popeyes opened, I think, on West Main, and they had like 50-car lines for like 3 months. Because people were so excited. It was the same time the chicken sandwich came out too, so it was like really blowing up. But I'm happy. I'm going to Raising Cane's all the time when it opens in Canton because that is one more place to not go to Chick-fil-A, basically. One more reason to not go to Chick-fil-A.
So the rest of this episode is going to be a little heavy, my friend.
Okay.
Because we got a few things going on. We are on the verge of a possible UAW automaker strike. And this morning came news that Blue Cross Blue Shield's UAW workers, which if you don't know, there's a bunch of administrative functions and customer service and stuff that are actually UAW. So with Blue Cross Blue Shield, there are more than 1,100 workers walking off. I had thought it was around 1,400. I'm not exactly sure, but it's a lot. In fact, we know employees who have reached out to us and they're like, yeah, we're working from home today because of the strike that this just hit. This has actually been boiling around for months, this contract negotiation. I can't help but notice the timing on this, Norris.
Yeah, I look at all this and I see not just the strike that is happening here, but also the strike that's going on with the actors. And I think right now is
Writers Guild,
Yeah. Right now, I think it's just a pivotal time for collective bargaining in general. We saw over the pandemic that CEO payments and the gap between CEOs and workers grew exponentially, not like by one time, not by 1.5 times, but by like 10 times. I think there's a lot of resentment and animosity. People are talking about changes, moving forward to the 4-day work week or less hours in a day, in addition for more benefits and higher pay. It's one of those things where I feel like if the UAW strikes, there's going to be a lot more collective action across the country. And this may be a wave of union action that we see really for the next couple years if this indeed goes through and lasts for more than a couple months.
I mean, that also will have a large economic impact on things. Now, some would argue the other side that what would be the economic impact of paying workers more? That's one way to look at it. But, I mean, with the automotive industry, it is competitive. People will still buy cars. I am curious to see how this is going to play out because it is 2023. You have different forces at play. You also have generational forces at play. When I was younger and cards on table, my family has a lot of UAW connections to it. The union workers were generally the voices of older people, and you've still got some of that. But generationally in the discourse, you've got older people saying 5 days, do the work. And then you've got younger people who are like, we need to reform the system. When I talk to people who are younger, very rarely do I hear anyone say that they want to do 5 days of work.
I am sort of one of those people that's kind of in the middle of that, right? I don't necessarily see, that being the panacea for the issues, right? Just having one less day of work. I don't necessarily see that solves the issues that we have in terms of the discrepancies in pay, in the general mental health of workers in America. I think there's a lot of other issues. We talked last week on my show about paid leave for families that Gretchen Whitmer is looking to pass in the state of Michigan. Those are more so, to me, the type of things that actually benefit people as we look forward into the future, because maybe you would need that extra day if you knew your family would be more taken care of, if you knew that you were paid with more equity, if you had more options on childcare moving forward. So I think there are certain things in these negotiations that probably should be had more so than the 4-day work week, because even with that extra day, if you made the same amount of money, you got the same amount of issues.
So for me, it's about moving the Overton window. In fact, we're going to have a conversation with a labor expert on the show about the 4-day work week and the different modes of it, and also the different legislative and cultural supports needed. Because to me, culture eats strategy for lunch every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of at the root of all this stuff. There are so many cultural conflicts in our country right now.
Yeah, and this is going to be a big part of it, just like the actors' strike is a big part of it. That's a culture clash, not just between CEOs and actors, but it's a culture clash between big tech and the rest of the country. I think this is a culture clash between sort of the generational differences in blue-collar workers, like you said, but there's also political ideologies that are at play here. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it moves forward. I'm very much so looking forward to that conversation, Jer, as somebody who is not an expert. But I think one of the things that we need to be mindful of looking forward is, as the very landscape of automotive changes, as everything moves towards EV, I'm interested to see how this plays out, because, I'm not necessarily hearing about more plants being built in Southeast Michigan. I'm not hearing about expansions of EV stuff happening in the region.
I mean, you got some battery plants in various areas, but they're
Yeah.
spread about. And part of the core of this negotiation on the UAW side are those plants going to be unionized?
That's the big thing. It's real easy for a lot of these companies to ship that labor off to Mexico or China or whatever, where they don't have to deal with these particular issues. But if EVs are going to continue to be a thing, if they're going to be made affordable in this country, I think a lot of people are going to have some tough conversations about those union shops.
I mentioned this in the Slack between us, but there's a number of podcasts where I actually learned about how far EVs are actually in China. My mind was blown. They already have hot swappable EVs and in that market. And I can't help but think this part of what drives this discussion, right? Because China is such a huge auto market. Asia is a huge auto market. They're already full bore into EVs. In fact, in certain areas, I believe in Shanghai, if you buy a combustion engine, you have to pay a $10,000 car registration fee. If you buy an EV, that $10,000 fee is erased. That's what I call an incentive.
Absolutely. I believe they have similar incentives in places like Singapore as well. But one of the big things, still, now that doesn't necessarily completely change the carbon footprint, because the factories are still billowing smoke into the atmosphere. But in terms of the consumer side, they're way ahead of us, so much so to the point that they have like EV graveyards already. So I'm really interested to see how this pans out. But you're right. The big three in the automakers here in the U.S., they have to figure out a best way to make this palatable to the average consumer. And this strike or potential strike is going to be something that could potentially be something that sets the tone moving forward on that topic.
It is going to be something to watch, and we will be doing that. Norris, I didn't want to talk about this one for a while. I wanted to get all the things in a row, because this is something that's been happening in Hamtramck for a while. You've got a large change in political leadership over there and a lot of uncomfortableness, to say the very least. Basically, in recent years, there has been a new mayor elected to Hamtramck. It has resulted in a number of policies that some residents feel are very exclusionary. Meanwhile, Mayor Amir Ghalib talking about how everyone's included, things like that. There's been so much tension over there. Some of it heightened by the fact, we go to these Detroit City FC games. That is a center for kind of people who really want to push the idea of inclusion. And I mean, just inclusion, flags, the whole thing. It has been an ongoing issue. It's getting national coverage now. And I can't help but remember a few years ago, the idea that Hamtramck was going to be this kind of dream where all these groups were going to be able to get along and make things work and be peaceable and all this other stuff. And yet this controversy is tearing that town asunder. I mean, I have listeners reaching out to me being like, yep, I moved out straight up because of this situation where you have a community going through yet another shift in demographics. A lot of people know Hamtramck is a Polish enclave, but you've got Bosnian, you've got Bangladeshi, you've got Yemeni, you've got so many things in there. And with that comes changes in politics because no group is a monolith. And what has been expressed in Hamtramck has been a more conservative version of Islam compared to what you see in Dearborn.
Yes.
It's been a high flashpoint. And this has been building up, but two recent incidents. One at the recent Hamtramck Labor Day parade, where council members demanded to march at the front of the parade and did not like being next to the LGBTQ group. There's a whole story in the Hamtramck Review about it. I will link to it. You can read it. And then Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, showing up at the Azul Hall like a mile from this studio, talking about all of his right-wing things, and the mayor posting pictures about how welcome he is and trying to say everyone's welcome. But here's the thing. You're an idiot of a politician if you don't realize that, posting yourself with a high-profile person in politics that's out raising money was out in Sterling Heights. Look, that guy doesn't show up unless there's a reason.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to get people talking about what's happening and what are the true colors of Hamtramck's politics. And it's clear rightward shift.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the issue is twofold. The first issue, I will address my fellow left-leaning folks first, because again, I'm all for addressing things in the house before you start talking about other folks. And the first thing I will say is that talking about those shifts in demographics, talking about the fanfare sort of, if we go back this time 4 or 5 years, there was so much fanfare about Hamtramck being a majority Muslim city, about the diversity that it brought to America, about, it being a model for it to be a safe place for such an enclave to exist.
There was reports in the BBC about international reports about this.
Yeah, and especially we just passed the post 9/11, thinking about post 9/11 and what that meant to be Muslim in America and seeing that story, it was positioned as something to be proud of. And I think fundamentally it still is. However, I think for those of us on the left, and especially those on the left who are not people of color, there was a energy that these are people on our team. These are folks who ascribe to some of the same beliefs that we ascribe to. And as you said, everybody ain't a monolith. And if we're talking about Islam, there are conservative sects of Islam and conservative aspects of Islam that are never going to jive with modern liberal ideology.
Democracy.
Period. It's not going to jive. And just to get even deeper, there are people who interpret some of the hadiths in the Quran, and in the hadith is the word of the prophet himself, or interpretation of what the prophet has said, that are anti-homosexuality, that are anti-LGBTQ.
Christianity has these things too.
Same deal.
Many religions have these.
Especially in the Abrahamic religions,
yes,
right?
I'm not trying to throw this one group under the bus here.
Exactly, especially in the Abrahamic religions, right? So, with that context and with that lens, it is intellectually dishonest to think that in a majority Muslim city that there wouldn't be those elements. So the fact that this is catching so many people by surprise, I think is a little bit short-sighted.
I also think another thing about that is Hamtramck's such a small city that, 20,000 people, that something that is a minority in one city, a very small minority, can gain steam very quickly.
Well, and I don't even know if you could call it a minority, because he
not
won,
in Hamtramck.
Yeah, he won the election, so it's not a minority. But the flip side of that, in looking towards the legislature and looking towards the leadership there in terms of how they've handled all this stuff, is the exact opposite of intelligence, in my opinion. If you are somebody who is a conservative that's running a town surrounded by a big old blue bubble, the big blue blot that is Southeast Michigan, I think that there are some things that they've did completely wrong. I think the Michael Flynn visit is ridiculous, especially considering the current indictments on Donald Trump. I think it's silly to do so knowing that you under so much heat, but he's doubling down. And that's the thing that's happening in Hamtramck. And to hear that certain people are moving out is a double-edged sword, because for me, I say, I'm not going to live where I'm not welcome. So if you're an LGBTQ person and you see this and you live in Hamtramck and you have the means to be able to move out, some are.
And some that are not LGBTQ.
Exactly.
But they're concerned about their property values. Also, some of the things like allowing for public sacrifices, like in backyards and things like that.
Yeah. It's a lot that's going on there. However, it's a double-edged sword from the sense of it's almost like, quote unquote, letting them win. And by them, I mean people who disagree with your existence, you know, because I hate when people say it's a lifestyle or a choice. It's not. It's an existence. I fundamentally disagree with how it's been handled and the messaging behind how it's been handled. And I think there are certain moments in life where I'm not sure there's common ground. And I'm not sure that common ground is something that should be looked for here. If you disagree this much, the only recourse is to do everything in your power to remove folks from office. That is all you can do.
I mean, this has a lot of just implications in general. I mean, I don't see long-term how Detroit City FC stays in Hamtramck.
Absolutely not. No.
I mean, there's a lease, there's an agreement there for the next couple of years, but I don't see any way that happens.
I mean,
I haven't talked to anyone there, but that's speculation. When you think about the fan base and who supports them, I don't see how that's tenable.
I mean, since this has occurred, I personally have not been back to Hamtramck because I don't want to spend my money in Hamtramck. And I think you're starting to see a lot of that. And it just
I know a lot of people like that.
And it sucks that, you know, DCFC and many of the bars and you know, comedy clubs that are in Hamtramck will probably suffer from this. And the sad part is that the leadership in Hamtramck is okay with that. They're clearly okay with that. They're okay with losing attractions.
I mean, they officially say that everyone's welcome.
No, but they're okay with losing these attractions, losing potential taxes and dollars and businesses because they don't align with their ideology. And when somebody has drawn that fine of a line in the sand, at that point, you can't do anything but say, we'll go somewhere else.
Well, there's been so many officials that have left in recent years. And if you think about the one female Hamtramck councilperson who is a convert to Islam, they're gone.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a point where you can't operate in that environment. And although they haven't talked publicly about it, I can't help but look at it and go, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. The one woman? Oh, yeah, for sure. I feel for the community out there. I understand how difficult it can be when the leadership doesn't necessarily represent you or represent what you stand for. But also at the same time, I feel like if you can get out, do so.
I mean, I don't know if I agree with that. Like, I don't know if I agree with that because I do believe in standing your ground.
I mean,
when you can. And to me, I feel like this is part of a greater, go ahead.
No, I was about to say, I feel like that's a little bit easier for you to say.
It's way easier for me to say.
It's way easier 100%. For you to say.
100%.
Because when you have a group of people that have literally said, I do not agree with your existence, period. Not we have an ideological difference and we can debate and maybe change.
Yeah, this isn't
minds.
A decision about your millage rate.
Exactly. Or a decision about what school you send your kids to or what we should teach in the school. No, I disagree.
Well, some of it is about those topics.
Some of it, but
and it's those topics that are even crazy stuff.
But I fundamentally disagree with the fact that you live, that you exist. I wouldn't want to be in a place like that.
And that's the message that's being sent. Regardless of what they say online, that's the message that's being received.
Yeah.
And that's totally fair.
If there is an LGBTQ person who wants to stay and fight, I respect the hell out of that choice. But if there's LGBTQ people who want to get out of that situation and don't want to be in a municipality that does not value them as human beings, I understand that too.
I think a lot of people were taken by surprise by this because they're like, oh, well, because originally I believe he ran as a Democrat.
Yeah.
The party is not, I don't think, happy with him. I would not assume. And if they are, that'd be weird.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's an analogy here to things like another known right-wing figure in former Detroit Police Chief James Craig. Mm-hmm. I have been asked so many times because for years I have said that guy's a Republican. I don't mean that in like I hate all Republicans. No, that man is a Republican. It is clear as day. And they're like, well, I know him and blah, blah, blah. No, look at what the person says. And I think this lack of attention to local politics, especially in areas where everybody's a Democrat or everybody's a Republican, not everyone's a Democrat, not everyone's a Republican.
Well,
and the thing is that you got to look at what they say. And if you look at what he said at speeches over the years, like I've been to unveilings or press conferences, or his stance on gun ownership, that wasn't just you should own a gun, but like everyone should have a gun. Of course he's a Republican.
Yeah.
Of course. He's been one the whole time. And everyone didn't want to hear it.
And it goes back to something we used to say in the Black community, which is all skin folk ain't kinfolk, right? Which is just because this person looks like me does not mean that they ascribe to the same beliefs that I have. And I think when it comes to modern liberalism and the Democratic Party, there's this belief that all folks who are either Black or Latinx or Muslim or whatever will somehow fall into this big tent of liberalism because conservatism doesn't want those people. It's not true.
It's about winning.
It's about winning.
It's about power. And when you see this alignment of Christofascism and Islamic fascism,
and quiet as it's kept, African-American men, older African-American men are becoming more and more conservative, to your James Craig point.
100%. And you see that happening. You have to get out of the bold blocks of things. You got to look at the nuance. And that's the thing that drives me crazy about this national lack of interest in local politics. I just read a thing like just a few percentage points of the city of Charlotte showed up for a primary local election this week. That whole decline in local interest, not just papers, not just the coverage, but individuals, where our entire conversation is defined by the president and whatever, that is going to have huge long-term impacts, because what people do is they go down the line and they say Democrat. They don't go, oh, but who is this guy? Is this a Democrat that I agree with? Because when you have just two parties, issues are more complex than that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And listen, it's why Al Sharpton never won the presidency, right? Because if it was just about all Black folks voting for the Black guy, Al Sharpton would have won the presidency, or at least won the Black vote, which he did not. So I think as we look more into not just local politics, or as we look more into even just regional politics, this is going to happen more. You're going to see more and more people who have a D by their name, but are actually Republicans, or have R's by their name, but might be more moderate than they're willing to say. At this point, don't look at the parties. Unless you're far right or far left, the parties are irrelevant. You have to sit down, look at what these folks are saying in the papers, look at what they're saying on shows like this one, look what they're saying in your local news. Because to be perfectly honest, you know what's happening on a national scale. You don't need to rehash that all the time. We know, because it's force-fed to you. So take the time, look at your local news outlets, follow these people, because these are the things that are going to have the most direct impact on how you live your life right now. So that's what you should be putting your energy into. Listen to Daily Detroit, please.
I'm going to leave it there. Norris Howard, so good to see you.
As always, great to see you as well, Jer.
I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. If you want to support what we're doing, these kind of conversations, they're not always brand safe. So these kinds of episodes, they need your support. Patreon.com/Daily Detroit. There's lots of things that we cover that are more, but when it gets heated like this is something where we need your support to step up. So patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Feedback, as always, 313-789-3211. dailydetroit@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.